the StaffCon committee, and Jen has done a wonderful job at organizing and being our fearless leader to help us keep organized as we move through this. So a big thank you to Jen. So starting off, I just want to point out that if you are looking at any type of whether it be the multiple view or the gallery view, if you hover over my video, in the top right-hand corner, you'll see 3 little dots pop up. Click on that and then click on Pin Video, and that will make my video come up large. And no matter who's talking, you'll be able to just kind of see what I'm doing. So it can be your primary visual for the rest of the session. So a little bit about Sip and Paint. You might have seen these events advertised in your local communities, community centers, restaurants. Essentially, it's an artist-led activity where we walk through how to do a painting step-by-step together. So if you are here and you have your artist materials, you have everything you need, great. You can kind of follow me as I go along. We're going to be doing this painting step by step. If you don't have quite everything you need, or say you are lacking a color or two, let me know in the chat box, and Jen can kind of shout them out to me so that I can kind of give you sub instructions along the way to kind of like makeshift things. I did a practice run with somebody who did not have the color blue, which, as you can see, is kind of essential, but we made it work, and it turns out they had a very lovely, more green toned canvas at the very end. So yes, we can definitely make it work. And the other thing about this is that the point of these is that you are all encouraged to play, and you're encouraged to make your image or your painting or drawing your own. So it's not about having this result at the very end. It's about having something that is uniquely yours. And the cool thing about this is that we're going to be able to show each other at the very end all of our doodles and our drawings and paintings, and so we're going to be able to see kind of like the unique differences between everybody. So yeah, I encourage you to make it your own and just consider this kind of the bones of the project. Let's see. Okay, so in terms of paints, so paper plates is what I'm going to be using as my palette. Oh, also, we're going to be recording this, so if anybody doesn't have paint and they're choosing to do the doodling, which I'll intro next, you'll have the recording so that you can maybe do it later with your family or friends. That being said, okay, supplies. So I'm using paper plates as my palette. I have acrylic paint that I'm going to be using, a glass of water, a large paintbrush. You can kind of see it's like maybe roughly about an inch wide, plus a smaller brush. Something with a point would work really well, or this kind of like angled flathead would work really well as well. And yeah, so if anybody, oh, and then either a canvas or paper. So if you're working on paper, when it gets wet, it will wrinkle a little bit, but that's okay because you can still flatten it out later. If you're, I'm going to be working on paper that I've gessoed into a canvas. That's not necessary, but for your paper, it can help a lot if you tape the edges down. And then at the very end, you can kind of get that nice border all the way around. If you don't have tape, or if you don't have fancy paper, heavyweight paper, that is completely fine. We will make it work. If anybody has to run and go get any supplies or tape or anything, I'm going to give you a quick moment to get those supplies ready. In the meantime, for my doodlers, I'm going to give an introduction to your project. Okay, so mindfulness doodling. A friend of mine told me that that is the hippiest thing that they have ever heard me say. And I guess it kind of is. But so mindfulness doodling. So this project is inspired by one of those adult mandala coloring books that have become very popular. Here's a couple examples.
Yes, Regan, I was just returning your call.
Here's a couple examples. I thought somebody had a question. Here's a couple examples of different doodles that I did that were just kind of like go with the flow, wasn't really following any rules. But doodlers, so you need a pen and paper, you need markers, coloring, colored pencils, crayons, all of that is completely optional. And how you're going to start your doodle is you are essentially, I'm just going to draw on the back of this, you're essentially going to take your piece of paper and I want you to just kind of scribble. I want you to just kind of like make a couple lines, maybe circle around a few times. If you want to have a few harder, crisp lines, that'll work too, and maybe come back to where you started. So this is literally the easiest thing in the world. And then what I want you to do is take every single section and you're going to do a different pattern. So maybe over here, I'm going to do kind of like a fish scale kind of pattern. Over here, maybe I'll draw a bunch of dots. In this little section, maybe I'll make kind of like a crosshatch. And take your time kind of filling in each of these different sections. And the point of this project is literally to just kind of like keep your hand busy, keep your mind steady on something while you listen and get to kind of like check in and see what we're doing over here with the painting. So it's I'm going to be coming back to the doodlers less frequently than the painters, but doodlers, keep in mind that it's about mindfulness and it's about keeping anxiety low. I had a student in my office once who came in and she was very upset. And so I was like, here, draw this, and then let's talk in 5 minutes. So she did. She like got a chance to calm down, and next thing you know, we came back and we had a great conversation to work out what her problem was. So great thing to use for kids, great thing to use for spouses. I use this on my husband, to be honest. But yeah, so painters, we're gonna get started with our painting, and this is our blank canvas. We are going to start with a little dollop of blue and a little dollop of red. So I'm putting a little bit of blue and a little bit of red on my palette. And then I'm going to take my big brush, my bigger brush, whatever size you're working with is fine. If you're only working with one brush, that's fine too. And I am going to take a little bit of this blue and I'm going to add a tiny bit of red to it over here off to the side. And you're going to end up with a much deeper blue. Okay, so we're starting in the background of our painting. And I kind of want to make it even a little bit deeper. So I might add just a little bit more red. If it starts to get a little bit brown on you, then just go ahead and add a little bit more blue. People who are painting on paper, there's a good chance that the paint is going to soak into the paper a little bit more, so you might not be able to get a fully blended technique into your background, and that is completely fine. If your paint ends up being a little bit more sketchy, then that will work out very well. It'll just have a little bit more of a painterly effect. So essentially we're going to start to create kind of like this like deeper shadow that kind of circles our canvas. You might have to make your color a few times. So essentially I'm just going to kind of like round in on all four corners. All four corners. Okay, so there's kind of like an outline so you can kind of see what we're working with. If you're working on canvas, your paint is probably going to dry a little bit slower. If you're working on paper, your paint will soak into the paper and it might come off a little bit drier. If you're working on canvas, it might stay wet a little bit longer, which means that you might have more luck with our blending. Okay, so that's probably what we want for our edges. I'm going to get a little bit more blue. This time we are going to use the straight color of blue. We're not going to mix it, and we're going to do another circle of blue all the way through in our oval. And when you're blending, all you want to do is take your brush and drag it back into that color a little bit. And essentially, you're going to just fill all of this in with this new layer of blue. And if you're working on paper, you might have to use a little bit more paint. If you want to get your brush just a little tiny bit wet with water, then that will also help your paint spread a little bit more rather than, because it spreads out the pigments in the paint color. Okay, I need a little bit more blue. And then for my drawers, again, mindfulness in the drawing sense. If it starts to feel a little bit mindless, that's okay, because that means that you're not taking so much time to care about what the outcome of it is. It means that you're focusing on the experience of painting and the experience of drawing, which is really the part of drawing and painting that can be so relaxing when you're doing it. Okay, so there's our next ring. Okay, so now we're going to take more blue, and we're going to use a little bit of white now. And feel free to take your time. You don't have to try to keep up with me. Okay, so I'm going to take my blue, add a little bit of white. And the color I'm looking for is kind of like a deeper sky blue. Not super, super, super light quite yet. We are going to get lighter. If you kind of get a little bit of that red in there, that's completely fine. All of my colors are kind of mixing. So that's pretty much the color that you're looking for with your blue. And then we're going to take that and we're going to just put in another ring. Okay, so fill all of this in, and then your blending techniques, same thing. You're just going to kind of like move it back into that previous color. If it doesn't blend perfectly, that's fine, because we're going to be putting a lot of different textures and things into the foreground of the canvas, foreground of the image. Regarding this type of paint, so if you're using acrylic or tempera paint, tempera is made with, I believe it's made with egg whites, or I think earlier in history it was made with eggs. They call it egg tempera, or egg whites, or I think that's how like they used it like back in like the Roman times. Both egg tempera and acrylic paint are water soluble paints, which means that when you mix water with it, it spreads out the pigments more evenly. Other type of paints include oil paint, which means that you have to use more oil-based solvents in order to spread out the pigments. So a little bit like cooking there too. Okay, so I'm going to make one more lighter color, and this time we're going to go for an even lighter blue. So I'm taking a little bit of blue, a little bit of white. I think I want a little bit more white. Okay, so this time we have much more of like a cloudy sky blue. See that? Okay. And we're going to come in and we're going to give one more circle to our background. All right, and then for this final center layer, I'm going to take whatever white is left on my palette. Just kind of going to grab white. It has a little bit of blue mixed in, but that's okay. I just want to grab some of that white and add it to the center. And blend that in a little bit. Okay. So you might also, if you're having trouble with the actual blending, you might be ending up with some more brushier brush strokes, which just kind of might look like that. Like any type of texture that you're coming up with right now is completely fine. Okay, so we want that to dry for a quick second. So I'm going to give it maybe about 30 seconds. The good thing about oil paint is that acrylic paint or tempera paint is that it does dry rather quickly as you're working on it. So while I'm letting that dry, I'm going to take my water glass and I'm going to just mix my brush into my water to try to get all of that blue out of there. And it kind of helps to kind of like brush it against the side of the glass. All of that color out of there. And then I'm also going to blot my brush onto my paper towel. And that's going to help quite a bit as well. Depending on the kind of brushes that you're using, you will, it might hold water really well. So make sure you blot it even at the very top, even like right here at the brush, because this part of the brush can store water. And then next thing you know, when you're painting, you get a big sploosh of water and can be frustrating. So make sure you try to get your brush as dry as possible. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a new plate because my last one, new palette, my last one was getting a little bit messy. And then still a little bit wet, but I think it's like kind of just tacky right now. So we can keep working with it. If you want to wait for this layer to completely dry, then feel free to go ahead and slow down. Next, we're going to come in with yellow. So let me give you a check-in. So here's what we're working on. We just did the background. Now we're going to come in and we're going to work on our Starry Night, Moon, and Stars. So this is very Van Gogh inspired. Vincent van Gogh is an old Impressionist artist from the 17th, 18th century. I should know that. He's the one who did Starry Night, and I can put an image reference in the chat box a little bit later. But Starry Night is a rather famous painting where there's a lot of very brushstrokey layers, very thick paint. Vincent van Gogh had a very unique personality. He chopped his ear off, if that is a helpful reference that helps anybody know who I'm talking about. Anyways, we're going to take a little bit of yellow, a little dollop of yellow, and we're going to take some white. And I'm going to start with my white, actually. I'm going to move some white into the center of my plate. grab a little bit of yellow. And then I'm going to keep adding yellow until I get the color that I want. Essentially, I'm looking for kind of a lemony kind of yellow. That's probably perfect. So something that kind of looks almost kind of like a yolky kind of lemon color. And I'm still working with my big brush. You're working with your, here, let me get somebody, okay. If you're still working with your, if you're working with your small brush at this point, that's fine too. But I'm gonna take my big brush, I'm gonna put my big moon over here up in the left-hand corner. And essentially, I'm just gonna kind of like let the brush do a lot of the work, and I'm just gonna spin it. It probably, you might have to add a few coats to it in order to really get that yellow to pop out against that blue. If your blue isn't completely dry, you might kind of start to get a little bit of a green color, and that's completely fine too. Okay, so there is our moon. And then I'm going to add a few more stars. So some smaller circles over here. Smaller circle over here. And then I'm going to really to just kind of like create a very well-rounded composition, which means that there's kind of like an even flow of like objects or things happening in the image. I'm just going to kind of like balance out this with two more little moons down here. Okay, so my palette, I definitely got a lot of blue on this. So I'm going to mix up another, I'm going to rinse my brush off real quick and mix up another little lemon yellow on this side. Just to try to keep that yellow as true as possible. Although green stars aren't that bad either. That actually might look kind of cool. Okay. So now to mimic Van Gogh's style with his Starry Night, we're going to come in, and this is where you get, we're not blending anymore. We're going to have more brush strokes around the whole thing. So I'm just going to add in kind of like these little hashes. One ring of hashes around the big moon, another one that kind of like, another ring that kind of like breaks up and divides all in between those little hashes. Okay, and then I'm going to add another layer of hashes, little brush strokes around each of my stars, my little bursts of night color. Ooh, similar to how like Bob Ross had his happy little trees. I wonder if like bursts of night color could be like my tagline, you know?
I love it.
Thank you. Okay, so we're adding our little burst of night color. Okay, and then I might want just a few more, make the moon kind of stand out a little bit. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to also go back over my moon with one more layer of yellow. If it's still not turning exactly the color of yellow you want, you might, yellow is a very light transparent color, so you might just need to let it dry fully and then add a few layers of yellow in order to like really get a solid yellow to sit on top of that blue. But for what I have right here, I think that this is actually pretty good. Okay, next, let's see. My yellow palette is already kind of messy, so I'm going to get another plate. Okay, so I'm going to wash off my big brush again, still using big brush. I'm going to pat it dry really, really well. All right, and then I'm going to take a new palette, use some of the blue that I had previously mixed. We're going to look for a lighter shade of blue, so kind of somewhere right here, maybe like this shade, somewhere in there. So I'm scooping some blue off of my previous palette that I used. If you need to get fresh paint, that is fine too. Okay, so there's my blue. Now I'm going to do another layer of brushstrokes, blue brushstrokes, in between all of these little yellow hashes that I just made, and I'll give you another reference. And that kind of helps the yellow kind of blend into the background a little bit, but it also adds a lot of texture so that it's not just kind of this flat blended image. This is also where you can have a lot of fun and try not to be picky about what it looks like. Try not to be too perfectionist about the brush strokes. There's a lot of paintings out there that really thrive on a more messier brushstroke that really kind of like help them feel like they're all together. Another thing that you're probably going to have a lot of fun with is that when you step back from your painting at the very end, you'll probably see it in a different way that might even be like, oh, it looks actually really good. Okay. And down here. Another thing is that a lot of these more brushier brush strokes, they're going to have more thicker pieces of paint on the canvas, which means that it's going to take a little bit longer to dry. Okay. So by this point, you should have something in the world of this. Or maybe you went off on your own completely and you're doing a completely different painting, and that's completely cool too. I can't wait to see it. So I'm washing my brush off. And I'm going to, something else that if you want to do it, it's a little bit optional. Actually, let me show you real quick. You can take a little bit of that blue. If your yellow is dry, you can kind of highlight that this bigger burst of sky color is a moon by just taking some blue and kind of shaping out a crescent moon right there. So yeah, I essentially just added a blue shadow to my moon in order to like curve out that crescent moon. Okay, now we can wash off our brush. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry for a minute before we get into the next part. I want to check in with our doodlers. So if you are doodling and you're having trouble kind of thinking of maybe another pattern or a next step, maybe it's time to start coloring. Maybe you do another quick scribble to see if that inspires anything. At the end of the day, it's really just about the exercise of doing something creative rather than the actual outcome. For anybody who has joined a little bit late, I'll just quickly review the doodling exercise one more time, just so that you can kind of jump in and get started before the end. We still have 25 minutes. So essentially with doodling, this exercise is inspired by kind of like the adult mandala coloring books. And here's a few examples of just different things that you can try. Here's one that's unfinished, but you can get a sense of it. So essentially, if you want to start a drawing, you're going to take your piece of paper, pen and paper is all you need, coloring is optional, and you're going to just come in and make a scribble. Any kind of a scribble. It can have lots of loops, it can have some more hard edges, it can be anything you want. And it doesn't have to be perfect, there are no rules. So you're going to make a scribble, and then in each of the sections that you just created, you're going to go in and you're going to draw a different pattern. And then those are going to be the different pieces that you go in later and color in. I personally think that this is a great exercise to do with younger kids. And it kind of encourages them to make their own coloring books in some ways. On the adult level, I love it just because it can keep my mind from spinning when I start to get overwhelmed with something. And you can still pay attention to all the other background things going on. So good for Zoom fatigue too. Anyways, so we are back to our painting. Okay, so I'm going to take my palette. I'm going to move to using my smaller brush. So here's mine. And we are going to now use black. And if you're still waiting for yours to dry, you can hold for a minute before you move to this next step. But we should be good even if we run into a little bit of wet paint on the canvas. So so I have black on my palette. I have my small brush that's dry. You're going to take your thumb and we're going to draw out our horizon line. So the length of your thumb from here up, put it at the very bottom of your canvas. Wherever your thumb is, that is where your horizon line is going to go. If you have a very tall thumb, you're going to have a very tall horizon line. But, okay, so there's my horizon line. Goes straight across. And then all of this, I'm going to take my black paint. In fact, I might even come back to my bigger brush to make it go a little bit faster. Come back to my bigger brush and I am going to just blacken that in. So the whole bottom. Okay, and we'll do a quick image check. Okay, we're going to start in with our tree now. Okay, so using our smaller brush, we've already kind of created this flow in the canvas a little bit. Essentially, I want you to start over here, a little bit off to the right side. Start with your line here, get a bunch of paint onto your brush, and I'm going to start with a line and I'm just going to drag it up and curve in. So kind of create almost like an S shape in a way. So, and then we're going to come maybe about like the length of your pinky, like at the very base of the tree. And we're going to start kind of coming off of this line here. And we are going to curve up and kind of mirror that line. When I did a practice run with a few folks, I had some people who really wanted to create a tree straight up and down. That's completely fine. The cool thing about trees is that they will look pretty legit however you make them. And then once we have the outline of our trunk, we're going to black that in as well. We're going to color that in with our black paint. And I find that this is the place in the painting where people can get very frustrated really easy because they want their trunk or their line to look a certain way, and it can hard to make it do exactly what you want it to do. The next step after this is going to be when we can kind of cover up any little mistakes, so don't feel like you have to get too finicky. So I'm now to add a few branches. So I think I'm going to put a branch kind of like off here, maybe going up into the moon a little bit. I'm going to thicken up the base of the branch where it connects to the tree. Okay, and then I think I'm also going to put a branch over here going up into the sky a little bit taller. Okay. Have a branch coming off of the side over here. You can really do anything you want with your branches, but I would say keep it minimalist. So we don't need a ton of branches, just a handful. I'm going to put one more off to the side here. So I've added 4 or 5 branches. That's probably about all you really need. And then if you want any of your longer branches to have any like extra stems that kind of brush off of them, you can add those pretty easily as well. Okay, cool. So now for the fun part. And it looks like we're going to have plenty of time to be able to see everybody's. Okay, so I'm washing off my little brush. Drying it off really, really well. I think I'm going to grab a brand new palette. If you still have room, then don't feel like you have to. And I'm going to add red and white. Red and white to my palette. So maybe just a little dollop of red, dollop of white, just about that much. And I'm going to take some of my red to the center, tiny bit of white. I'm looking for kind of a cherry color, maybe a slightly deep coral. I don't quite want that fire truck red that came out of the tube. I just want to lighten it up a little bit. So when I was picking colors for this part, I chose red because I was thinking a lot about the cherry blossoms that we all didn't get to go see this year. So maybe this can be our take-home cherry blossoms for this spring. So, and then this is also where if your black isn't completely dry yet, and you start to add in some of this color, that you're going to get kind of some muddier, darker color. So if you want to wait for the black to continue to dry, or if you want to try to put in all of your leaves and cherry blossoms around the black, then that will be completely fine. Don't feel like you have to finish by 4 o'clock with me. You can keep working on this because this is the end of our day. So this is what we're putting in next. All right. So essentially, I have my little brush, And I am literally just going to put little dots, just making little hashes. In drawing, this is called stippling. In painting, I guess they're just kind of brush strokes. I've got some wet black paint right there, but I'm going to kind of like avoid that area just a little bit. If you start to get black mixing in with your red, you can always wait for that to dry and then go back into it a little bit later. We are going to put a few different layers of red in. Oh, another thing is that if you all keep working on this after this session is over, it would be really great. I would love to see what everybody has drawn via doodling or your painting, or maybe say you do this a little bit later with kids. If you could put this on Instagram or Facebook and hashtag AU Appreciates or hashtag StaffCon2020, or even I guess post it at AU Staff Council, that would be great, because those are all places where I would be able to find it, where we can all find it and we can all see what everybody else has done. So I'm going to keep putting my dots in. And the cool thing is that once you kind of start putting some color up against these really, really dark colors, they kind of start to pop out really well. Okay, so I need to make a little bit more of my color. All right, so once you have whatever you're comfortable with here at this stage, I am starting to get a little bit of a muddy color kind of around here, so I will stop there. Oh, if you have any spots in the tree where you're not completely happy, so like right here, the line isn't completely perfect, so I think I might just like add in a few layers there. That's the secret to being an artist, just knowing how to cover up all your mistakes later. See, everybody really can be an artist. I have a little bit of an imperfection in my trunk right there, so I'm going to add in some leaves there. Right here, it's not completely perfect, so I'm going to add in some color there as well. Yay! Okay, so one more layer in all of our cherry blossoms. I'm going to take, you can take a very, very, very light white color, almost like the lightest pink you can muster, maybe something like that. Or you can just take, already having red on your brush, you can just take some white and add some highlights to your trees. And the highlights on trees is really good when it's at the very top. So that's how you kind of start to see a little bit of a form. You have a highlight on the very top of each of these different sections. And then underneath, it's a little bit darker. So something else that you could do is even come in with a little bit of a darker red and like almost like a purple. A good way to do that is to take some red and add a little tiny bit of blue to it. You can deepen the red and add in some little dots of deep red or purple kind of underneath. That might really help make a lot of this foliage feel a little bit fuller. So yeah, when you're done, you can sign the bottom right-hand corner, sign a date, and yeah, I can't wait to see pictures. And then anybody who put tape on their canvas or on their paper, when you take your tape off, let's see if I can do it. When you take your tape off, you want to try to pull the tape as close to, like, don't pull it out like this, pull it flat against the surface so that you don't tear the edge. And then you can get a really nice, wonderful frameable edge kind of right around there. So yeah, I think it would be really great if we all turn our cameras back to gallery view, unpin my video, turn your videos on, whether you were doodling, whether you were painting. It would be great to see a quick check-in to see what everybody's currently up to. Lots of doodlers. Oh, I love it. Oh, good job, everybody. Oh, we have some painters too. Oh, those are wonderful.
I'm a little behind because I use watercolor.
Oh, you're fine. Nice. Oh my gosh, amazing.
Hey, I'm behind. I'm gonna finish later.
Yes, please finish later, and please make sure to tag it. If everybody would keep yours up, I would love to take a quick screenshot of anybody who is around. And then that way we can kind of keep this as a quick record. I'll give you a countdown. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Got it. Perfect. Nice. Good job, everybody. I'm so proud.
Thank you so much, Chelsea.
Of
I'll pay
course.
you later when I get the supplies.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes, you'll get the recording, and it could be something that you even do with, you know, kids, family, friends, anybody at home. So yeah.
Just
Well,
watching you was so soothing.
good.
No wonder Bob Ross is so popular. It was so soothing just watching you. It was just relaxing. It was just like, oh.
Oh my God. Bob Ross, if
Come
anyone
on.
has Netflix, all of his shows are currently on Netflix.
Amazing.
And it's like just the worst thing to just sit there and just like leave on in the background. It's amazing. It's good.
Wow.
If I could channel any ounce of Bob Ross, then I'm honored.
I think you did. Captured. Captured.
Thanks for the inspiration. I want to get back to my paints at some point now.
Nice.
I just had the pen and paper, but now I'm like, oh, I should take my paints back out.
Excellent.
Elizabeth, I like your background so much.
Liz is an artist.
It's amazing.
Liz is an artist. So
Thank you so much, everyone. We dropped in a bunch of information for you in the chat box. Don't forget there are lots of other events this week that you can attend and participate in. We have trivia, we have the financial wellness seminars, we have a bunch of things. So keep an eye out for it and register. And thank you for joining us. It's been a really great day. I think I can speak for us all. We've been madly texting one another on Teams as we went through the day and supporting everything. That it's just been so inspiring, and we're just tremendously grateful for all of you and all that you do for our community. And it just is a really nice way to end the day with such gratitude. And thank you so much, Chelsea, for inspiring us with your calming and relaxing painting and mindful doodling. I'll definitely do more of that. Thanks so much, everyone.
thank you, everybody.
Now it's time for your happy hour, whatever that may be.